Welcome to an overview of the Vital Landscapes and Resources Report. This is a report that was required by the Colorado General Assembly under Senate Bill 24-174. And this is a project update in August of 2025. I'm Scott Williamson, the Land Use and Water Planner with the Department of Local Affairs. And joining me is Christina Kacher-Webb with Logan Simpson, who is the consultant helping us pull together this report. We're excited to share with you an overview and update of this report, as well as one of the key resources we've developed, which is a planning guide, and talk a little bit about next steps in our process. First, let's talk a little bit about what Senate Bill 24-174 required of both DOLA and of local governments and regional entities. The Vital Landscapes and Resources Report is a key recognition of the values that Coloradans share when it comes to the connection to open space, wildlife habitat, and other priority landscapes. The report also speaks to the preservation of agricultural land, historical and cultural resources, urban parks and green spaces, ex-urban open spaces, recreational resources, wildlife habitats, and also the preservation of ecosystems in the greatest need of conservation and for hazard mitigation. To put this report in a bit of context, I'll also talk about another report which was required under Senate Bill 24-174, and that's the Strategic Growth Report. As we know, our state faces challenges associated with housing Coloradans, and the Strategic Growth Report helps us identify opportunities to grow in a way that lessens the impact on the things we care about, but also provides that key housing for Coloradans and the communities we all love to live in. So the Strategic Growth Report is required to be published by DOLA and submitted to the General Assembly by the end of October 2025. And it really focuses on where and how Colorado builds. To do that, we focus on the impacts of two different land use scenarios on the topics listed here. And we're also required to identify policy recommendations, including state and local laws. Now, for the Vital Landscapes and Resources Report, that's due a couple months later at the end of 2025. And that's really focused on what Colorado protects and connects. And it's intended to include opportunities, best practices, tools, and resources for local governments and regional entities to implement the protection and connection of these priority vital landscapes and resources. And DOLA serves a unique role, even though we're not subject matter experts in all of these topics. We're familiar with providing those resources that can be helpful to local governments and regional entities to do this work on the ground. Now, talking about the local aspect of this work, Senate Bill 24-174 also required local governments to include a strategic growth element and a water supply element in local comprehensive plans by the end of December 2026. Most relevant here is that beginning in 2026, local and regional planning commissions must also consider the following reports and documents when adopting or amending a comprehensive plan, where they're applicable or appropriate. And as you can see, that includes the two reports that I've mentioned today. So the Vital Landscapes and Resources Report and the Statewide Strategic Growth Report. And our conversation today and the resources we've developed are intended to make it easier and more straightforward for local governments and regional entities to do this work in a way that fits with your local planning process. So the report identifies some key methods for the connectivity and preservation of vital landscapes and resources. We take a key look at interjurisdictional opportunities as called for in the legislation, as well as this integration into comprehensive plans. When we asked local governments and regional entities through focus groups about the strategies that are most helpful for protecting and conserving high priority lands and landscapes, we heard 5 of the top strategies. Now, this isn't all inclusive of those strategies that were identified, but these were the top ones. And that includes long-range planning, dedicated funding, the mapping of wildlife corridors, partnerships and with adjacent communities and with county and regional governments, and the direct land ownership of conservation lands. All right, now with that overview of the context, I'm going to turn it over to Christina to talk a little bit about where we are in report development and what to expect moving forward.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scott. Okay, based on that framing and that background, we've developed 2 broad goals. One is first to fulfill the Senate Bill 24-174 requirement of providing a report to the General Assembly. This report includes that background information, framing, integration with the strategic growth report, barriers, and descriptions of how we are informing local governments and regional entities to complete this work. The second main goal is to provide resources to local governments and regional entities and communities when implementing and updating their comprehensive plan, as well as other program area planning efforts. So this became the Planning Guide and Toolbox. The Planning Guide and Toolbox offers a variety of guidance, technical resources, and a suite of best practices to complete and protect the vital landscapes and resources in Colorado. The main audience for these deliverables are local governments, MPOs, as well as partners who are important in conserving and protecting vital landscapes and resources. Today, we're really going to be focusing on the Planning Guide. The Planning Guide, which we were calling the template if you were a part of any of our earlier focus groups, is a step-by-step practical guide for planning staff, commissioners, local government officials, public, and partners in considering during comprehensive plan updates, as well as other planning efforts. It's a step-by-step guide which involves 5 steps. The first step is to developing that project scope and partners. When thinking about vital landscapes and resources, they aren't specific to a jurisdiction. So that's where the interjurisdictional opportunities really is important. So defining that larger project scope within this planning effort is very important. And who are those partners in those opportunities for reaching beyond jurisdictional boundaries? Second is developing a public engagement plan where you're identifying your values and incorporating feedback from a variety of community members and public. Finally, then the third step is identifying vital landscapes and resources, either through mapping or other means. And step 4 is drafting your goals and policies. So as part of a comprehensive plan, there's goals and policies that identify the needed actions done at that jurisdictional level to protect and conserve vital landscapes and resources. And then finally, the implementation strategy or action plan. And this is where you'll pull from a toolbox that identifies some of those best practices and tools that could be correlated to the respective goals, policies, and values that have been identified in those previous steps. Each step in the planning guide includes a narrative of the why and the purpose of that step, specific resources, including any contacts, helpful links, and resources within the toolbox, as well as connections to case studies and examples. Then there's a set of key questions to ask the community and yourselves as planners throughout those steps. Okay, so now we're going to go through each of the steps in a little bit more detail and provide some highlights. Step 1, it's important to consider those regional connections, working groups, and coordination as they may align across jurisdictional boundaries. In this step, you'll reach out to additional project partners and identify the scope for the vital landscapes and resources. These may include adjacent municipalities, MPOs or regional governments, conservation districts, transit and transportation groups, as well as federal land management partners and state agencies across different departments. This is one example that we did in Larimer County where we had a comprehensive plan that involved a variety of stakeholders. These stakeholders represented different advisory boards within the county, but also residents, especially in the rural parts of the county, and then broader interest groups such as the Watershed Coalition and Colorado State University to provide background on natural resources. This is just one example of how you can involve a variety of different partners in your planning for your project scope. In the report, we have a list of many more examples of partners to reach out to, as well as contact links for those state agencies. Step 2 is where you reach out to a variety of members of your public, including residents, employers, business owners, developers, ranching communities, historic societies, anyone that may be involved in protecting vital landscapes and resources that were identified in the Senate bill. You can also reach out to nonprofits, recreation groups, wildlife groups, or other types of local organizations. During this step, you'll identify your values as a community. While there's topic areas listed as important landscapes and resources to Colorado, these vary and may be specific to each of your jurisdictions and areas around the state. So here you're going to want to identify what are the values, the specific values of your community related to each of those topics. You'll do this through a planning process that will reach out to communities, and we provide examples of different engagement techniques from focus groups to open houses to surveys in the planning guide. Another important consideration in this step is to involve a variety of different community members, including those that may be historically underrepresented in planning processes. The planning guide includes resources such as DOLA's community-driven guide for community planning, resources for tribal collaboration, and other tools to identify those communities to include in your planning. Step 3, mapping, the fun part in my opinion. So the planning guide outlines a couple different resources and approaches to mapping your vital landscapes and resources. So in step 2, you identified what are the values of the community, and then this step is where you pull in the specific data layers related to those values. In the planning guide, we have identified the topics that are listed in the required topics and identified which resources and mapping tools are available. In Colorado, we have a great resource called Codex, put on by the Colorado Natural Heritage Program, that combines and gathers a lot of resources already for you to use. You can use this website, and they also have training and specific help to pull all these resources on their website and identify each of these values. That's kind of at the easy entry point as well. You also can create your own mapping. One thing we found is some of these statewide data sets are less specific in certain areas. So you may have data that's more specific to your area that you would like to use and create your own maps and pull existing data that you may have at your disposal. For example, you can go on to Codex, and if you're looking at agricultural land, you can dive into the soils or the land cover data to be able to pull reports and information on what data is available for your jurisdiction. There's also a few other resources such as Compass, which is the State Historic Preservation Office resource that you can reach out to them to get more information and access. And then at the federal level, who manages the threatened and endangered species data, as well as another example. Okay, after you've established those values in step 2, and then the mapping in step 3, we'll identify draft goals and policies. Draft goals and policies, when it comes to a comprehensive plan, are the elements that highlight what is important to the community and your priorities and general direction setting for your jurisdiction. That's related to a comprehensive plan. You can also pull in specific goals into other types of planning efforts based on the values and mapping as well. These goals typically describe the desired future condition of each of those vital landscapes and resources for your community. Here's one example from a comprehensive plan, and these can be integrated into other sections of your comprehensive plan that may already be established. So typically a comprehensive plan in communities might have like a growth section, an economic section, a natural resource section, the water element, or however that jurisdiction decided to divide up the topics in their comprehensive plan. So this doesn't need to be a new section. It can be easily integrated to existing comprehensive plan topics. This one was about reducing the development impacts to the natural environment, and included a variety of policies that encouraged protection of sensitive lands and biodiversity through native species protection. Finally, step 5 is to identify a path forward. So now that you have your values, your goals, and your mapping, you want to pull in some best practices and resources and tools. These tools can be pulled into a number of different elements. When we talk about a comprehensive plan, typically that's not going to be your end goal. So you may have additional plans, studies, development code updates, or capital improvement projects that stem off of those goals and policies. This is also an important time to check back in with your interjurisdictional partners. They may be involved in completing some of this work already, and you can reach out to them on implementation and partnering for implementation. This step is where we refer to the toolbox. The toolbox is a list of different tools that stem from a number of existing resources as well as best practices across the state. For example, you probably already have looked at the Planning for Hazards or Resiliency Toolkits or the Land Use Best Practices. Again, this isn't all new information. You can integrate existing resources, and you're already building on a plan if you've looked at these toolboxes. The toolbox has a list of case studies and examples of where this tool has been implemented across Colorado, as best we can in Colorado, but sometimes other states as they can be more applicable. And so you can pull different policies and tools that are important to your community. Here's one example of how in Larimer County, again, the natural environment section identified different action steps. It identified specific actions that could be done and how that would be implemented, whether that's through the development code update, through regulatory form, or partners, agreements, or capital projects, for example. Identifying a specific lead and partner as well as timing is important in creating any action plan. In the toolbox, we've tried to provide additional information for how the tools can be applicable to different communities. First, we've identified foundational tools that lay the groundwork for larger projects. And then we've identified additional aspirational and visionary tools that may require additional community input and resources to implement. Also, we've tried to identify where different tools are applicable, whether that's more urban or rural or a smaller community versus a larger metro area. Okay, that is the overview of the planning guide with a hint into the toolbox as well. Hopefully you found that informative of what you can, what information and resources are forthcoming in that planning guide. So next steps, we are in that phase where we're checking in with our agency working groups, technical advisors, as well as a variety of different stakeholders to finalize and revise our report before it goes out to the larger public audience. And then we will be creating the final deliverables. So here in the next month, we'll be integrating also some other information that is forthcoming, including the land use survey results from DOLA, making sure that we're syncing with strategic growth and any recommendations, as well as framing that comes out of that report. And then later this fall, we'll have the documents for final public review before it's delivered to the General Assembly. With that, we'll wrap up. Again, thank you for listening and participating in this webinar. Scott?
Yeah, thank you, Christina, and thank you everyone who watched this video for your interest. We know that the topics covered in here are critically important for our state, and I can assume are important to you. So thank you for your continued interest and work in this area, and please feel free to reach out to DOLA with any input or suggestions or questions you have on this report, and we look forward to working with you into the future. Thank you very much.